morning. I swear a lot.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello. Welcome back to the Abno Story Records readings. It's been a while. In fact, it's been way too long. In fact, I really shouldn't have left it this long, but here we are. We're here now. So, Rai provided me with a list of abnormalities I had already read, which was incredibly helpful, and I used that list to compile a list of the abnos I haven't read. And there's a lot of them. There's actually quite a few of them. There's a few more than I was expecting, actually. We also have the endings of the game to look through as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the remaining readings and the viewings of the endings into two videos. First video will just be story readings. The second will be the remainder of the story readings and then the endings as well. So then we can wrap everything up nicely that way. I still haven't made time to read Wonderlab, but I guess I'll get around to that at some point as I can, and I don't even know when I'm starting Ruina, but it will be soon. If you ask me when I'm playing Ruina, it will not make me play it any faster, so don't. But let's get on with these. And first up, and I guess it's a nice mild one to get us started, is the lady facing the wall, which, well, it didn't really do much in my playthrough, probably because we got her so late and everyone was so strong by the time we got her. Although, it has to be said, Screaming Wedge is an excellent weapon. An abnormality in the shape of a woman against the wall. Over time, her unbearable sorrow grew into a mournful obsession covered in countless lengthy hairs. As she is always facing the wall, not a single person has seen her face. While she does occasionally talk to herself and weeps quietly, it is impossible to have a meaningful conversation with her. Despite her human appearance, it is impossible to discern what she is really looking at or her true intentions. She will attempt to talk to or pique the interest of those who are about to leave her containment unit. However, one should never look back in response, as it may cause mental damage. Certain rumors insist that one may turn to stone upon looking back, but this is clearly not true. Excerpt from observation log is it I or 1? Doesn't matter. 304. There is only one important rule to follow. Ignore her. She always tries to draw our attention. She mutters incoherently in an attempt to have those in the room pay closer attention to what she's saying. She'll even plead or whisper maliciously when someone is about to leave in the hopes that they may instinctively look back. The subconscious is a threat to your own health in her presence. It is important to have your guard up and to be aware of what is occurring when you're in the room with her. If you forget the warnings for even a second and let your guard down, you may find yourself looking back towards her. I have another warning to leave to all those who read this. Do not let this insidious abnormality learn your name. If she learns your name, she may use it to trick you into turning round. No matter what you hear or what she may do to tempt you while you're in the room with her, do not, and I repeat, do not, under any circumstance, look at her. Curiosity is a luxury you must never indulge in when you're in her containment unit. Excerpt from Counseling Log 9-39. Employee F5004. Redacted was a colleague of mine for whom I cared deeply. Well, I cared for all my co-workers, but Redacted was different. The amount of passion they poured into their work was something I've rarely witnessed in life. Anyways, I have no idea how she, that abnormality, learned Redacted's name. Maybe someone called it out to them while they were inside the containment unit and she heard it. We should have sent 2 in for work with her. The common procedure was to have a team of 2 sent into the containment unit, but as you know, we're always short-handed. Besides, the abnormality was low on the threat scale. If we followed the procedure and sent 2 inside, the powers that be would not have been happy about it one bit. Omitted. Well, you know the rest. The day the incident happened, Redacted was sent to the containment unit as usual, but they didn't come out for a long time. I know Redacted was a prompt and diligent worker, so I headed straight for the containment unit, fearing the worst. Thankfully, I found them without a scratch, but the kid looked out of it, like way out of it. Omitted. Next day, the kid was resigned. I heard they sent him to an asylum, but no one ever saw Redacted again. The kid just kept staring at the wall, murmuring and not responding to anyone. That was the very last time I saw Redacted. No one knows what happened inside the containment unit. You won't find out from the kid either. So the lady facing the wall is really just like, you know, it's kind of like a creepypasta, or what is it, like, you know, when you look in the mirror and you say Bloody Mary 3 times and she shows up, whatever. She's one of those kinds of deals, I guess. Well, it does say fairy tale. That is an F. She does have an F classification, so that does make sense. She's a story, a tale, you know, where it's like, oh, if you look at the lady facing the wall, your brain will melt or something. I don't know. She's alright, I guess. She's far from the highlight today, but she's interesting in her own respect. And like I said, Screaming Wedge is an incredible weapon, so good to have her in the facility. Not too hard to manage. I was kind of glad for that, actually. We had enough problems when we first got her as it was, without her also being a problem. I'm also glad they took out the jump scare, because I don't need that shit. Next up, this abnormality is a phenomenon with no visible form. It was discovered when employees began to exhibit shared symptoms when entering a specific area of the facility. They all suffered hallucinations of a specific nature, and their mental corruption increased. After setting a radio's frequency to 1.76 MHz, we waited. Following 12 minutes, a mysterious voice was heard through static. It was difficult to make out what it was saying, but it appeared to be in distress and was asking for help. 17 minutes in, the voice stopped and 3 loud explosions were heard, which were then followed by 2 smaller explosions. It can be assumed that the situation the voice was in was chaotic, as based on the various levels of screaming that could be heard. 23 minutes in, all was silent. Once 25 minutes had passed, the radio began to emit smoke. We thought the machine had fried, but no fault could be found. Continuing past 30 minutes, everyone in the area was suddenly filled with rage and decided to exhibit the desire to assault one another with extreme aggression. Following the incident, all employees who took part refused to seek counseling. We couldn't make it mandatory as no one was injured. It is still unknown what caused the collective rage. Afterwards, unknown noises and hallucinations started to occur near the containment units. This is a recording of the day we must never forget. It brings us to a chaotic place, forgotten by many, that must never be forgotten. Huh. So it's not actually like it's not an entity of specifically, it's a radio station, a specific frequency. In fact, it is just a specific frequency, that's what this thing is. What it represents, what it entails, what it's supposed to be, I'm not entirely sure. Well, I don't know, maybe we'll try and break this down. So, 17 minutes in, initially, a mysterious voice is asking for help. 17 minutes in, the voice stops and there are explosions. In-game, you can hear the sound of gunfire as well, so it sounds like some form of combat or attack is taking place, maybe a war of some kind. 23 minutes in, there's nothing. After 25 minutes, radio begins to emit smoke. Don't really know how that's relevant. And then past 30 minutes, everyone suddenly gets really angry. No, I can't actually imagine what the idea or purpose behind 1.76 MHz is. Because every abnormality seems to have a purpose, something that they do and a reason for doing it to some extent. Even if we don't know what that reason is, we can tell there's a reason, but this one doesn't seem to do anything for any particular reason. It's more of a, like I said, it's more of a phenomenon than an actual creature. You could get away with having this as a tool rather than an actual abnormality, but I guess the gameplay mechanics probably wouldn't have worked out very well, although I imagine you could do it. It would probably work quite similar to Theresia or something, so I guess that's probably why they changed it to be a creature abnormality rather than a tool one, but in its essence, I'd say more like a tool than a creature. Interesting enough. The gift is cool, I guess. Next up. Silent Orchestra, our first A-lift for the day. I bet this will be stupid, because this thing is stupid, because I hate it, because it's dumb. I hate it. It's not actually dumb or bad or anything. I just don't like that it steals my energy. It's a pain in the ass to work with. It annoys me. The abnormality itself is not bad or anything. I'm just being salty. An abnormality that loves art and tries to get the entire company to listen to its music, excerpt from an encyclopedia. The conductor not only corrects musical errors, but is also responsible for creating the best ensemble and taking command of the music. A conductor's skill can be determined within 5 minutes at the podium. The moment the conductor opens the score, the performers read the conductor's eyes, actions, and aura to see if the person is worthy to lead them. Without the understanding and harmony between them, the macroscopic significance contained in the score cannot be expressed. Therefore, an outstanding degree of influence, leadership, and eloquence are the essential qualities for a conductor to have omitted. First movement, calm and slow. The conductor begins to direct the apocalypse. Movements 2 through 4, cheerful and fast. Employees start to forget everything and show fervent adoration toward the symphony. The emotion soon turns into internal insanity, driving them to attack anyone near them. The orchestra gives impetus to the music, bringing the entire department to its demise. When all the performers have gathered, the music that no one can hear but everyone can listen to begins. Finale, the music shall perforate your entire being. Doesn't really mention movement 3, does it, where it's just a huge sensor beep, which is incredibly irritating. One of the most annoying noises I've ever heard, especially when things are already going wrong and you're struggling to deal with it because Silent Orchestra is messing with the screen. The music's alright though, it's a cool idea, typically with this game, I guess, in terms of many abnormalities and events and ordeals and stuff, I like the idea, I don't like the execution, it very much annoys me, but the Silent Orchestra in of itself is very cool. Not much of a mystery here, it's just music, it's just music that makes people go crazy. It's pretty simple, but cool. And obviously the gear is amazing. The gear is fantastic. I never disputed that. I just didn't want to go through the effort to get it because of how painful it is to work with the silent orchestra, but you know, it's a cool idea. It is cool. An abnormality that takes the form of a giant spider guarding its domain in darkness. It's difficult to see the abnormality with bare eyes. Small spiderlings skitter around the floor. A proud employee, Peter, subtle, entered the abnormality's containment unit one day. When he shone the flashlight on the floor, small spiders skittered away from the light. When Peter squashed one of the spiderlings by accident, a giant spider descended from the ceiling. Peter was dragged to the ceiling in only a moment. The cocooned employee hanging off of the ceiling of the containment unit will be a healthy meal for the spider's offspring. Unsurprisingly, not a single employee volunteered to retrieve the corpse of their cocooned colleague. Excerpt from an animal encyclopedia. A fact often overlooked by many is that victims trapped in a spider's cocoon are actually not dead. The prey is in fact slowly dying within. Their death is postponed so that they can be kept fresh for later consumption. A spider's poison contains a toxin that permanently damages the heart, eventually leading to death. Insects, trapped in the pitch-black cocoons, have no choice but to wait for the spiderlings to feed on them, feeling their heartbeats slower and slower. Omitted. Excerpt from the head of the welfare department's letter. We do appreciate your suggestion, however our own research indicates that your concerns are unlikely to be true. Furthermore, it is proven that the presence of a cocoon in the containment unit increases the energy output. For these reasons, we will not implement a rescue procedure for employees who are caught by spider-bud, as it is against our interests. However, we will allocate more resources into researching this specimen in the future per your opinion. Please be advised that disrupting the atmosphere of our workspace by spreading unconfirmed rumors is against the code of conduct and may even be subject to penalties, including dismissal. Lobotomy always values the welfare and voices of its employees. That's pretty funny. Head of the Welfare Department, Lobotomy Corporation. There's an eerie rumor spreading among employees. It's not out of the ordinary for a rumor or two to be spread in a company like this, but it is interesting that the number of alleged witnesses seems to multiply. The rumor says the following. Whispers can be heard in the containment unit at night. It was the voice of Alex, who went missing a few days ago. They say the voice wept in terror, asking to be saved from the darkness. Yeah, no one's going in there. I wouldn't go in there. It's terrifying. I hate spiders. But I wouldn't necessarily, spider-bud themselves is actually one of the nicer abnormalities in the facility, which I know sounds weird because it captures people and feeds them to its children, but let's acknowledge the fact for the moment that the only time spider-bud does this is when you squash one of its children, which means it's just protecting its offspring. It doesn't really do anything other than protect its offspring, in gameplay and apparently in lore as well. As long as you don't squash them, you're good. But yeah, terrifying. I would rather not. That would be the worst. I would rather not. I would literally rather do anything else. There are many terrible fates that could befall you in Lobotomy Corporation, but I can't think of many worse than this. Maybe just for me specifically, you know, arachnophobia and entomophobia. Too much. Don't like it. The gear is cool, I just wish it was a higher level. That suit deserves to be a higher level because it looks awesome. But the weapon sucks. The weapon can stay as a Teth, I don't give a fuck. But the suit should be a higher level just because of how cool it looks. It is pretty good for a Teth. It provides resistances to all damage, except Pale, of course. But when you're using Teth armor, you're not going to be really coming up against Pale unless you get really unlucky and get like Judgment Bird straight away, which is unlikely. But it's cool, it's cool. Ah, yeah, we got an interesting one now. Yeah, we do. It's our boy or girl. It's our they. Benediction. Such a good gift. Wears a black fedora and a beaked mask, has huge black wings instead of arms or legs. It is capable of human communication, though it prefers to talk little. It came to this facility by itself, claiming that the world has contracted a dreadful disease only it is able to cure. We could not find anything about this disease it refers to, probably because it's metaphorical. It seems to like treating employees when they are injured or sick. It shows satisfaction when helping others, and it seems quite sympathetic and benevolent. Even after a week of observation, we found no aggression, violence, or attempts to escape. Only contributions to the assumption that this abnormality is eminently gentle. 12 of our employees use this word to describe this creature, and good for us. Employee Alex, who apparently was killed by the spider, who had a serious scar on his forehead from subduing an abnormality, walked into this abnormality's chamber with his scar's recovery incomplete. The abnormality, which isn't normally loquacious, started talking as soon as it saw the employee's scar. The abnormality asked, "Why have you not treated that scar?" Alex replied, "I had no time, so I just gave it a little bit of first aid." Then the Plague Doctor answered, I shall heal you, curing you of all disease and injury you possess. Alex came out of the chamber with his scar completely healed. So, you know, there's not much to wonder about Plague Doctor really, because it's just the setup for White Knight. But the question I've always had, or had for a while now since actually dealing with this, is I wonder if anyone actually got Plague Doctor, right? And with no prior knowledge, no understanding of what Plague Doctor is, or what it does, or what it becomes, if they just never did it. You know, if they just never sent the 12 Apostles in, and never had Plague Doctor turn into White Knight, just kept it as Plague Doctor forever. Because it would be the easiest abnormality in the facility to work with, like, Jesus Christ. Though I guess when the cliff goes to 0, I think employees end up going there anyway. Like, it'll just choose some employees. I don't know. I think it'd be very hard to have a playthrough where you have Plague Doctor and not have it turn into White Knight, but I suppose it's not impossible. But speaking of which, it's time for White Knight, and this will be interesting. It takes the form of a newborn fetus, though the appearance is so grossly grotesque it's hard to even call it a fetus. While communication is possible, it doesn't occur in a normal way. Every word he utters echoes throughout the entire containment unit. My disciples, whom I blessed, ye shall leave the way of evil that once ye were following and find me. When the time comes, I shall forgive your sins and descend to the earth ye are living on. The 12 employees who are blessed by him will transform and roam the facility to deliver redemption to every single employee. Wings will grow from their backs and they will wear masks in the shape of beaks and bear crosses that forgive all sins. Follow my teachings as I told thee, thou wilt abandon flesh and be born again. His disciples will be born again as ones who shall reach out to those far away from the light, ones who shall embrace their neighbors, missionaries who shall spread the gospel to all their fellows. They are. The time has come, soon the bell shall ring, a new world will come. Rise, my servants, rise and serve me. I am death and life, darkness and light. So that's the interesting thing about White Knight, is like, you know, when you have a universe, a world, a setting, if you will, a fictional setting where, like, monsters, quote unquote, because that's not quite a description of what abnormalities are, but it's, you know, an easy way to describe them, I suppose, verbal shorthand. When you have monsters in a world, right, and there are loads of different kinds and varying levels of power, especially not just physical strength, but the ability to affect the world around them, sometimes without even directly interacting with it, what constitutes a god? What constitutes a demigod? At what point do you draw those distinctions? Because it comes down to the person looking at the thing going, well, it managed to lift an entire building with its brain, so it's probably a god. This thing can bless people and turn them into apostles. Now, all the terminology involved is, of course, coined by White Knight itself. It is intelligent and it's powerful, but it could be considered a god. It could be considered simply an allegory to Christianity. It could be considered something of a disease spreader, in fact, ironically considering the Plague Doctor's name, because just because White Knight calls the blessings it gives the apostles blessings does not mean they are blessings, does not mean it is benediction. You could look at it as White Knight infecting 12 employees and taking control of them in that manner. It'd be cordyceps. I mean, I prefer this to be more of a religious allegory, you know, I think it's way cooler and more interesting. But it's distinctly possible the White Knight is just intelligent enough to describe itself as being some kind of god, but the reality of what it does is much more down to earth, as it were, a bit more mundane, but no less horrifying or catastrophic. I mean, you know, that doesn't really explain away the pale pulses. But then again, we never really know why Judgment Bird can do that. There is some magic involved, of course there is. Some power, like soul power, the power of the soul, power of the entity. Something along those lines. But I'm actually kind of like the idea that White Knight spreads a disease, an infection. It's a parasite. I don't know, I kind of like that idea. I'm not presenting it as canon in any way, shape or form, and there are many holes in that theory, I'm sure, but I like the idea. Sort of irony against its origin as the Plague Doctor. But very cool. White Knight was a horrible nightmare to deal with when I actually had to fight it, but as an overall abnormality, it's very cool, the theming is amazing, and it's surprisingly easy to deal with, but still provides some pressure, because you've got to advance the Cliff of Meltdown counter in order to keep working with it successfully, and if you can't keep working with it successfully, it will eventually initiate the Advent. Surprisingly well designed. I just wish fighting it wasn't so fucking boring as well as being really hard. Now it's time for Queen Bee. Beyoncé. Its form appears to be an amalgamation of a gargantuan beehive and a bee. A cross-section of the inside shows a darkish red surface with particles here and there, much like that of raw meat. The segment that appears to be the face is heavily distorted. It has wings, but they lost their intended function of flight. The one eye that remains relatively intact shows pupillary movement, as if watching for approaching intruders. The abnormality always remains still, so it is assumed that it does not move. When certain conditions are met, or whenever it feels like it releases spores. It will generate billions of spores within a 20-meter radius. The existence of life forms in its vicinity seems to be one of the key requirements. When it did, there was no immediate change in the employees even who inhaled the spores, and no anomalous signs could be detected on the examinations that followed. Once more time had passed, the employee experienced severe pain in their occipital lobe and abdomen. Then after a certain period of time, their head dislodged from their body, and a worker bee emerged from the separated body. Which is awful. It has been confirmed that the spores carry drone eggs that hatch inside a living host. Based on the findings of an autopsy done on an employee killed by the abnormality, we believe that the larva will subsist on any portion of the body, be it blood, organs, or fat. It will move freely around the body at this stage. When it becomes too large to move, it creates a cocoon near the intestines. The host feels extreme hunger at this stage, eating much more than usual. This cocoon moves upward through the body as it grows, eventually damaging the arteries of the throat and the cricothyroid? I don't know. With its jaws as it severs the host's head from the body. After this, it will emerge from the body, exacerbating the wound of the host further. Exacerbating the wound. The host doesn't have a head anymore. Whatever. Sorry, I'm losing some of my professionalism on these readings. Oh no. Excerpt from counseling log. Redacted had been telling me about his itchy neck for a while. He complained about indigestion too. One time, I saw him take a bunch of digestives. Who'd have thought it'd turn out to be such a serious issue? I never knew I'd be the one to witness that horrible moment. Omitted. Redacted and I were just chatting, but suddenly he stopped speaking. He was still scratching his neck. It was turning so red I was getting worried. Then his neck started to turn at such a strange angle. Right then and there I realized the severity of the situation. There was no way he could have been putting his neck that way on his own. It looked like someone was forcefully twisting his neck. And then I heard a zip, like the noise of shredding paper, a foreign sound of something tearing. His head fell to the floor. I heard a dull thud. Then, as if enough hadn't happened already, something began to crawl out of his neck, just like a butterfly emerging from a cocoon, tearing apart his headless body. The wings, the yellow trunk, the teeth that gnawed away his body. It's something I never want to see again, a being I'd hate to describe as something alive. Omitted. It seemed to be aware of me somehow, but it didn't look like it had any reason to attack at that moment. It picked up his cranium and flew away, like a drone carrying honey. I can still hear the sound of its jaw rattling and its wings beating. Worker bee. Its appearance is clearly different from queen bees, other than its color. It is capable of flight, but can only hover about 1 meter above the ground. It lacks antennae or eyes. A long appendage that appears to be an intestine tracks behind its rear on the floor. Worker bees show only 2 forms of behavior: delivering nutrients to the queen and proliferating. Upon encountering an employee, it uses its jaw to crush their head and then proceeds to inject a pupa into their body. Awful. Awful, 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 awful. That one and actually, that's way worse than Spider-Bud, to be fair, I think. I think that might be worse than Spider-Bud. But they're both awful. I am biased, because I hate spiders and I hate insects. But awful, terrible, bad. Not good, awful, bad. Terrible, 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 terrible. And what an annoying abnormality to work with as well. At least Spider-Bud keeps to itself. This fucking thing, if you so much as go near it, it's like spores everywhere, kill all the clerks, turn them into bees, try and turn employees into the bees. Worst. Worst abnormality. It's not actually the worst, but it does suck, and I hate it. Moving swiftly along, its gear is very cool. I love its gear. The suit, the guns, the Hornets were some of my favorite employees in my final run. I loved the Hornets. They were fantastic. This abnormality sucks ass, and I hate it. It doesn't actually suck ass. It's very good in terms of being an abnormality in this video game, but I personally don't like it because it's horrible. So there you have it. Speaking of abnormalities I don't like that are horrible, it's time for Alriune. An abnormality that knows of spring's genesis and autumn's passing. Its surface is smooth as if it were ceramic. In the place where the abnormality's eyes should be, it is empty. The cracks and openings are instead filled with growing plants. Alriune, a lovely one, a doll yearned to be human. It was adored by people, its pupils soulful. Alriune, abandoned in a dark forest, its eyes stolen by crows lusting for glitter, its mind, life, and heart slowly withered away. Alriune, lacking eyes but all-seeing, a human yearned to be a doll, bearing the hope to return to dust. It shall go back to the grave with all that desires to live. God, I hate Alriune. God, I hate Alriune. God, I hate this thing. God, it's just the fucking worst. Killed Strawberry for a start. But it's also extremely temperamental, easy to break out, teleports, is just annoying, does lots of white damage, a lot of white damage, so if, for instance, you have forgotten that one of your employees perhaps doesn't have very good white resistance on their armor, they might die upon encountering Alriune. It's a VAV, so, you know, second strongest class in the game, and yeah, its stats near enough reflect that. It's immune to white and endures black, and I'd like to point out that black and white damage are some of the most common damage types your employees will have access to in the later parts of the game, or at the very least it was for me. Very, very, very annoying. It's a good thing that its gift isn't very good, because I wouldn't want to get it anyway, because working with Alriune more than a couple times a day is absolute agony. Hard pass, don't want. This thing is terrible, I hate it. Moving on. Ah, Child of the Galaxy. This is a nice one, except for when it kills my people. It was a night veiled in gentle mist. A barefooted child was looking at me. He was crying, his dreamy eyes filled with sorrow. The sadness hanging on his face stopped me in my tracks. He said he lost something precious, and when I offered to help, he gave me a big smile. A teardrop fell from the child's dewy eyes as stars showered from the sky. The world falls into a slumber, trapped in an ecstatic lullaby. That night, the galaxy descended with bare feet. Excerpt from the diary of employee, redacted, who committed suicide. It takes the form of a young boy with big eyes and skin that resembles the night sky. The child shows great enjoyment with talking and playing with others. He has a strong attachment to the act of making contact with another. If the child and an employee reach a certain level of intimacy, he will give a small pebble to the employee he now considers his friend. The employee will feel happiness and vigor while in possession of the pebble. However, this pebble will do more than just good if the employee happens to enter any containment unit other than his. If an employee in possession of one of the child's pebbles, the strong sign of their friendship, dies, he will show deep grief and sorrow for their loss. Excerpt from Employee Redacted's diary. I looked into the child's eyes for a while. I may have spaced out a little bit because his eyes were so dreamy. I wanted to pet him, but I remembered my co-workers telling me not to have personal feelings towards abnormalities. I told him my name. He repeated it with wide eyes as if he'd found out a big secret. Each time he called my name, it felt like it became something more than just a familiar thing I had been living with. When another employee entered the child's containment unit, he did not follow that employee and looked for me instead. I felt basely triumphant after hearing about that. The kid follows me, not you. The moment I entered the child's room, he jumped into my arms crying. When I finally set him down, he shed a tear that became a small white pebble that fell in my hand. Please don't lose it, and don't give it to anyone else, the boy mumbled. Do you like it more than you like me? The boy quietly asked when I arrived after finishing working with another abnormality. I asked how he knew what I was doing, and he answered lightly, Isn't it obvious? I know everything, whatever you do, wherever you go. His gaze lay on the pebble, then he smiled. His eyes gave me goosebumps. I tried to rid myself of the pebble, but I realized it was beyond my control. I don't get what I'm talking about right now, but you still treasure it, right? The child smiles at me. Smiles, 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 smiles. I can't get this pebble off me. My only hope is to wait for the child to tire of me. I'm waiting for that day, but will it ever come? People tell me I'm an excellent employee. Idiots, they don't know a thing. Shut up. I can't take it anymore. I can't escape him. I thought I was in charge, but the truth is, I was just a pebble in his hands the whole time. Whatever I do, wherever I go, I hear his whispers. I have to end it, but I'm not sure if I can. I came from afar. I'm so glad to meet you. Become a pebble and let's walk the galaxy together. I hear his whispers and breathe. Pitch black darkness follows, just like the night I met him. Huh. So Child of the Galaxy is a lot more sinister than I thought. It is a child and we are toys, and it's like, I don't know, it's weird. Jealousy is a factor, it spies on you. It will kill you if you annoy it too much, I suppose. It's actually quite a mean-spirited abnormality in the grand scheme of things. It did kill a couple of my people a couple of times. I can't remember if I mem-rep those or not, or retried the days on them or whatever, but I think multiple people died to the Child of the Galaxy by the end of the game. Its gift is fantastic, right? It was a small amount of HP at short intervals is amazing. That can keep people alive. Success rate and work speed pretty good too, but that healing is the main thing. But yeah, a lot less benign than I was expecting. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised, most of the abnormalities are less benign than I was expecting, but this one especially. Quite surprising. Its weapon is fine, its suit is fine, but nothing to write home about, although the fact that our galaxy does have some range actually makes it a fairly decent weapon. If you got Charge of the Galaxy quite early in the game, I think he'd be very beneficial for you. But, you know, I didn't. I got them way later. Way later. Near the end, in fact. Or at least on the third run. I'm a pro. If you make a request, then I might help you. I used to be expensive, but I'll cut you some slack here. Under one condition. Hand that dreadful, cunning bastard over to me if you ever see him. I'll hang his head over my bed. Only then can I get up in the morning without having a nightmare. An imposing abnormality taking the form of a female warrior with a striking red hood. Her frayed hood has initials embroidered on it, unreadable due to the damage the hood has taken. Many patches can be seen on the hood, suggesting that it's been well worn. According to her own claims, she used to be a mercenary before coming to this facility, wandering around without fixed residence. She does not trust others easily, and has an extreme fondness for battle. She is unusually uncomfortable with parts of her face and body being exposed, or looking at a mirror. Other numerous symptoms of paranoia have been observed in her behavior. She has a strong desire to resolve emergency situations when they break out. She calls it a request of some kind. Since this behavior consequently helps management, the company recommends putting it to use depending on the situation. The following contains information that employees of every level should note. However, when she encounters the big bad wolf, the situation will change drastically. She will undergo several psychological transitions, including sudden depersonalization and intermittent explosive disorder. This encounter will lead to serious collateral damage, so it is advised to avoid any case where the two may face each other. Between us, there's no victory to be won. All I think about is how I'll kill that bastard in a way more gruesome and painful than the last time. Thus, there's no toasts to raise, there's no deliciously baked cakes to eat, or wine to drink. I got used to grinding the axe instead of picking flowers when I was 15. So it's actually interesting when you consider Red Riding Hood and the Wolf's rivalry in this game, in this setting, in fact, because abnormalities can't die. Abnormalities don't die. Which means neither Red nor the Wolf can ever beat the other. It doesn't matter who wins a fight, the other one still lives. One of them, they both still live. And they will never be rid of each other. Red can never kill the wolf, she will remain forever paranoid, and the wolf can never kill Red, so he will be forever hunted. Lose-lose, really, but they're both very cool abnormalities. I have to say I love them both, and I love their equipment. Like, both of them have exceptionally cool equipment. And Red is very useful if utilized correctly. However, the fact that Red's cliff counter decreases every time an abnormality escapes is pretty crippling, because as it turns out, Red might be one of, I'm not saying this with any known figures in my mind, but through observation from what I can tell, Red might be one of the highest DPS VAVs I've seen. She does exceptional amounts of damage with her guns. Ridiculous amount of damage. If you don't have decent Red resistance, your employee will probably die. She will probably kill someone on her way out, and she moves so fast that trying to lock her down can be really difficult. The best way to go about dealing with her, of course, is to see who she's marked, and then kind of plan your strategy around that. You know, have your employees wait in ambush near the one who has been marked to take her down. But chances are, if people are in the wrong place and she breaks out, they're gonna die. Like, if anyone got a really bad result with her and set her off or something, or was on the way to their containment units following a meltdown and didn't get there quite in time, they're probably dead. Because she will shoot them as she runs. Very powerful, actually. Overall infuriating. This is going to be an interesting one, for sure. The bird's eyes imprisoned light, the bird's arms concealed time, and the small bird's beak whispered endlessly, and as long as they exist, the apocalypse bird will not disappear. Funny that it actually has... Wait, it actually has work lists, but this thing doesn't exist in a containment unit. I like that they've done this, it's just funny that it's here. Known to come when the world is filled with sin, many employees fear the advent of this abnormality. To talk about this bird, we need first tell the story of the Black Forest. We must remember the forest that was once so peaceful and beautiful, and the apocalypse shall follow. The Tale of the Black Forest. Once upon a time, 3 happy birds lived in a warm and lush forest. The birds had no names, though the creatures of the forest would call them Big Bird, Long Bird, and Small Bird. Everyone lived freely and happily together in the peaceful forest. The birds wanted the forest to be safe more than anyone else, that way creatures from the outside world could visit and have fun. It was a warm and sunny afternoon when a stranger visited the peaceful forest. He was a traveler, pioneer, and prophet, but at the same time, he was a nobody. He wanted to enter the forest, but the birds found him suspicious, so they didn't let him in. The stranger, angered, told the birds as he left, "Soon a tragedy will befall the forest. It will be tainted with misdeeds and evil, and there will be constant conflict. The tragedies will only stop when a terrible beast appears and devours everything. The sun and moon will shine upon the forest no longer. The forest will never go back to what it was before." The birds worried about the prophecy. What if conflicts really break out and a beast shows up to harm the forest, just like the man said? That's when the birds decided to become the guardians of the forest. They loved this forest more than anyone else did, so they wanted to protect the creatures living in the forest and keep the peace. Big Bird, with its many eyes, decided to watch over the forest for intruders, for Big Bird's eyes could see very far and see things we cannot see. Then somebody said, "But what if the beast shows up in the middle of the night, when the sky is dark and everyone is asleep?" Worried, Big Bird burned all of its feathers to make an everlasting lamp. Now the creatures of the forest were under Big Bird's constant watch, day and night. To keep the forest's peace, Longbird weighed the sins of those who entered the forest, for Longbird's scale was fair and just and could weigh any and all kinds of sin. Then somebody said, "But what if the scale doesn't tip in either direction someday?" Worried, Longbird made a scale that always tipped to one side. That way, every judgment would yield a clear verdict. Smallbird decided to punish the creature's wrongdoings with its beak. Then somebody said, "But your beak is so small, no one would find it hurtful." Worried, Smallbird tore its mouth so wide so it could swallow any creature in one bite. No one could visit the forest anymore, and bad rumors about the forest began to spread outside. I heard terrible things happen to any creature that enters the forest. The Big Bird is always watching the creatures of the forest. There's no freedom. The Longbird's scale isn't fair at all. The Smallbird's punishment is so scary. The birds got upset. We worked so hard to protect the forest, why doesn't anyone appreciate our effort? Fewer and fewer visitors came to the forest. More and more creatures were complaining. Fights broke out daily, and yet the birds continued to work even harder to make the forest peaceful again. But no, this forest is so vast and wide, the three of us aren't enough to protect all of it. But there is no creature to protect this forest but us. If we combined our power, we could become stronger. The day when Big Bird's eyes that could see hundreds of kilometers away, Longbird who could judge any sin, and Smallbird's mouth that could devour everything united into one, darkness fell upon the forest. Creatures screamed in terror and fear at the sight of the bird, and the forest soon fell into mayhem. Then, in the middle of all the chaotic cries, someone shouted, "It's the beast! A big scary monster lives in the black dusty forest." "The beast is here?" The three birds, now as one, looked around, but there was no one to be seen. The birds began to prowl the forest looking for the beast. The forest would be in trouble if the beast really showed up. But there was nothing. There were no creatures, no sun and moon, and no beast. All that was left was just a bird in the black forest. Since then, there were only nights dark as pitch. Rumors say there is a terrible beast in the black forest where no one lives. Survivor testimony. Every single light in the facility went crazy. They kept flickering and flickering. I couldn't even use my lighter. Then, this warm light shone through it all. It looked like a waning twilight or a growing sunrise, though as we all know, sunlight can't make its way into our facility. Everyone silently gazed at the light. Sudden darkness and a weird ray of light were enough of reason to be frightened. It was scarier than anything gory we'd seen here. It was a true fear of the unknown itself. Omitted, something from afar was coming our way. Incandescent lights like stars from outer space were marching towards us. It looked like Big Bird's eyes, but it wasn't that abnormality. I could hear these long arms scratching the floor. Someone broke the silence with a whisper. That guy over there couldn't run away in time. There was an employee kneeling on the floor. Perhaps he couldn't sense the danger approaching behind him, and once he noticed, it was too late. He couldn't even scream. Nobody would have been able to then. He just meaninglessly struggled to move his legs, desperate to run from the beast. There was no heroic act of someone standing up against the monster, not even a yell to warn him. Everyone was just watching him, waiting for the terrible thing that was about to happen. Well, they put a lot of their story writing chops into Apocalypse Bird, didn't they? Jesus. So I initially thought, and I'm sure you guys chuckled when you heard me say it, that Big Bird was supposed to be the beast because it was the one going around killing everyone, you know, playing the heads off the creatures and all that. But the reality, of course, is the reason the Black Forest, which used to be lovely and is now terrible, is because the three birds tried to protect the forest and proceeded to ruin it in the process, which is a great classic little story, always fun. I'm surprised the birds aren't considered fairy tale creatures because it feels more story-esque than anything else. But the funny thing is that Apocalypse Bird itself is not that difficult to fight. Really? Quite easy, actually. I don't remember having much trouble with it. In fact, if I had been better prepared, or had been smarter about it, I think I could have dealt with Apocalypse Bird even easier than I did, and I didn't have a lot of trouble with it in the first place. It was a bit of a downer when it lost to White Knight, I have to say. I was expecting a bit more out of it, but, you know, White Knight is kind of more of an apocalypse than Apocalypse Bird. But the gear is great. Not as good as Paradise Lost, in my opinion. I get that, you know, there are people who know hard numbers and facts about these and would be able to tell me, no, Foreman, Twilight is actually better than Paradise Lost in these respects, or is better in general, or whatever. I don't know. All I know is that in my gameplay experience, I found Paradise Lost to be a lot more effective, both defensively, maybe not offensively, but just the fact that the employees stayed alive while using Paradise Lost made it more valuable. To me. Anyway, it's just my opinion. I prefer more defensive playstyles anyway. I play tanks in games and stuff like that because I like having characters who can take the damage. But, tangent. Apocalypse Bird is very cool. Cool concept, cool presentation, cool execution. The only thing I have to complain... No, actually, no. No, I don't have anything to complain about with Apocalypse Bird. I got annoyed when its story things would show up during day 49, but, you know, I lost my Twilight user. That's kind of my fault, isn't it? No, I don't have any complaints about Apocalypse Bird. I think they're fine. Maybe a bit anticlimactic. The actual suppression itself, its actual combat capabilities, is a bit anticlimactic, but I think there's enough spectacle and terror that it's fine. You know, it's good enough. It's more than good enough. It's a very notable event. It's very memorable. It's cool. It is cool. No one can say that Apocalypse Bird isn't cool, and no one can say that Twilight isn't cool either. Yeah, no, I think Apocalypse Bird is actually a rare... It feels mean to say it this way, but I have to... It is true. A rare occasion of Project Moon trying something really ambitious and interesting and actually pulling it off. Could they have pulled it off better? Sure. But you could say that about anything, and it's not fair to look at everything and just be like, well, it could be done better. Of course it could be done better. Anything can be done better. This fucking video could be done better. What do you want, you know? No, I think Apocalypse Bird... for what it is, absolutely served its role perfectly, and I think it's a very interesting and cool abnormality, especially with the 3 birds as well. Very cool. And that story record was great, actually. I really enjoyed it. I was genuinely invested in that one and wanted to see where it went. It's very cool. But we're going to cut it here, ladies and gentlemen. I prefer to keep these story reading videos a little bit shorter than my other stuff, just because it's easy for me to sit down for a long recording if I'm playing a video game, but here, I'm not playing a video game. I'm reading. And I like reading. There's nothing wrong with reading, but I don't really like reading for excessive periods of time. I'm also talking a lot more than I would be if I was just recording a game, because then I take breaks and stuff, and my throat has gone quite hoarse. Actually, I think I'm fighting a cold at the moment. So we're gonna leave it here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for watching. Part 2 is on its way, or the finale of the story readings is on its way, and it will include the 2 endings we haven't seen yet. Special thanks to Aris, Plutonium Pie, Dreamer Ghost, Leper Lullaby, K-Bub, Magic Owl, Peyton Barrett Hill, The Frostbite, Quantum Pizza, Monsoon, Sir World, Jumping with Joy, Warmaster Oku, SCP-106A, Namad, and Kenny T800 for supporting me on Patreon. Thank you so much, guys. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. We've got less abnormalities to check out next time than we did this time, but it's offset by the fact that we'll be checking out the ending, so I don't imagine they'll be that long, because Adam's ending wasn't that long, so it's fine. But we can wrap this up with a nice bow, and then that's pretty much everything I need to do in terms of LobCorp. Yeah, I still need to check out Wonder Lab, but I don't know when and how I'm going to do that, because if I tell myself, like, oh yeah, I've definitely got to do Wonder Lab before I play Ruina, then I fear I will just end up delaying Ruina, and I don't really want to do that. I'd like to get on with that when I want to do it, So I will check out Wonder Lab at some point. I will. I just don't know when. At the moment, I'm trying to cram as much into this break from... I mean, it's not really a break from Project Moon stuff, is it? Because I've done the story readings, but in this break before Ruina, I want to cram as much games, I guess, and general stuff I want to do into it as possible, because when we're doing Library of Ruina, I'm probably going to go back to the upload schedule I did with LobCorp, where it's like every other day is an episode of Library of Ruina, which means I'm not going to get a lot of time to do other stuff, so I may as well embrace it now while I can. But that's then. This is now. Thank you so much for watching. whatever happens next time, and it will be the finale of the Abno story readings, so I hope you're looking forward to it, and I hope I see you there. Toodles. Goodbye.